Let's say I have sort of good alignments at the top. And I wanted to, and I'm like, hey, Jim, I'm looking at this and I have like I don't have any increase on the way down.
Right.
And I'd like to have that.
Right.
I'd like to have that whip effect.
Yeah.
Maybe for me, as I'm starting down, am I having some sensations like my belt buckles moving forward and turning, sort of initiating down here, maybe not allowing this to turn right away?
And the real key for this that you need to do for somebody that has that problem is the understanding that as the club's going away, this is starting to happen earlier than they think.
Okay.
You're stacking your right side on the backswing, and then as you start down, you're stacking the left side. But you're definitely not stacking the left side on the backswing. You've got to get loaded up if you're going to hit it far and get some good trajectory on your shots.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this awesome video that you guys are watching, but just wanted to let you know about CogornoGolf.com. Specifically, we're now offering new coaching options with increased swing frequency, meaning you can send me your swing up to once a week, keeping the prices super low, trying to give you guys everything you need to help take your game to the next level. Obviously, as a member, you get access to everything. Even if you're in lockdown this winter, you can't get outside, we could still put a practice plan together for you to swing at home. I would love to work with you. Again, you get access to the practice, the member library, all of the master classes, and that feedback. Would love to see you there. We'll put a link in the description down below to CogornoGolf.com. Love to see you there. Hey guys, Eric here outside at the Jim McLean Golf School at the Biltmore Hotel in Miami, Florida. And we're here doing one of the videos I've been waiting a long time to do, which is the X Factor video. And you know, when you're talking X Factor, you're talking Jim McLean. I know you guys already know who Jim is. He's been one of the top golf coaches in the world forever. One of the guys I've really looked up to and built a lot of our videos and teaching philosophy around. So I'm super excited for you guys to get to see these videos. We're talking X Factor. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay guys, we're back here with Mr. McLean, and we're going to talk about the one topic that I really wanted to talk about, the sexy topic of the day, I think, for a lot of us, the X Factor, right? So the X Factor was something that you came out with a long time ago that I think is an awesome basic concept for a lot of golfers to use to improve their swings, hit the ball farther, generate more power. And I think as time has gone on, right, there's some kind of misconceptions, some confusion as to what exactly you meant by the X Factor.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about that first, your findings, how you came up with it, what it means, and then maybe we can talk through some ways of how people might be able to train in their swing. I might pop a couple short drivers out as we go. So let's X Factor. What is the X Factor? How we come up with it?
Yeah, well, I started looking at different things of the rotations of the body, what was happening, and there was no book written about it. Hogan had the idea of a 90-degree shoulder turn and a 45-degree hip turn. So as I was studying videos and looking at swings carefully, I was saying, well, you know, it didn't look right. I think there might be some differences there. So I went about trying to measure it, and I ended up working with a friend of mine, Michael McTagg, out in San Francisco, and he had a machine called the Swing Motion Trainer, and it was a machine you could put on your back and on your hips and measured your rotation. So I was able to have Michael come out, and we measured all the guys playing at Doral in the PGA Tour event, which was really cool. And back then on the tour, it was pretty easy because I was working with Peter Jacobson right then, who's a really well-loved guy, and Brad Fax, a few others. So they're using the machine, and then they'd get other people to come. So we ended up getting a ton of guys on there.
Were people looking at you a little funny on the range at that time?
Well, they were hooking them up, and you know, everybody wanted to see what they were doing. Now we've got biomechanics, we've got gears, we've got a lot of other things. But I think as time's gone on, with, as you mentioned, some of the controversies, what we're really finding is I was pretty close. I think the terminology is better now, but I think if someone really reads the book, they would see that, hey, this is pretty close. And what we saw was the variances. The longer drivers had a bigger differential between the hip turn and the shoulder turn. And what that means is you'd measure how much the hips rotated versus how much the shoulders rotated. And say John Daly had the biggest X Factor, which was the differential between these two measurements. And he turned, I'm thinking about 118 degrees, and I think about 65 degrees of hip turn. So he had a pretty big hip turn. And then we went all the way down the chain, and there were some of the tour players. One example was Lenny Clements was right at the bottom of the list when it came out. So then Lenny is lived in LA, but he came out and worked with me out in at Doral in Miami, and we really worked on stretching this X. Plus, and then I'm going to let you talk here. We'll go back.
Let it rip.
Plus, as you start down, as you change direction with the lower body, the center of mass moves first. You stretch that X a little bit further, which was another interesting part of the X factor.
So let's say like the first take home when you're looking at these swings, that's another thing, not to keep saying this, but one of the things that I really mimicked after what you do is presenting things. Here's what the players do. Here's the commonalities, right? This is what they do. And so one of those with the turning pieces was the correlation that those who had a bigger differential between the hip and shoulder turn would create more speed, hit it farther, more power.
Right.
Those with less differential, less power.
Yeah. It's the loading procedure as you rotate and move into your trail side. If you get into a really strong move, say like a smaller guy like Rory McIlroy makes a phenomenal loading up where the center of mass moves to the right quite a bit for him, a couple inches to the right, and he gets really loaded up here. Now he's in a very powerful position. Of course he's superhuman speed anyway, but he puts himself in a great coil position in the backswing from which you can unleash a lot of power. So I also would look at the amount of knee turn, and we know the knees don't really turn, but I just put a line across the knees. So I'd look at how much this turn compared to how much the hips turn compared to how much the shoulders turn. And it kind of was a nice symmetrical idea. This was about 25, this was about 50, and this was about 100. Kind of the mythical, perfect backswing. And a lot of players are pretty close to that.
What I think is funny, I guess is the word I'll use, and me too, like as I'm growing up watching, reading the books, right, and I'm trying to learn how to coach and learning concepts and talking to coaches, one of the, I think, main misconceptions is the idea of if I want to create differential, that must mean that I can't turn my hips a lot. When in fact, what you literally have in the book and everything is quite the opposite, I would say, in that even that example, 25, 50, 100. So 50 would be more than the 45-degree sort of standard thing we use. It's actually more than.
More than.
So long as you have the shoulder turn to go with it.
Yeah.
Right?
And we also saw that some of the really long hitters that maybe only turn their hips like 40 degrees on a short turn and had a little less shoulder turn, they still had a big differential. So if they only turn their shoulders, say 85, and this 40, that's a big differential, and they could really pop back. That would be like, someone like Jim Dent, who at the time was the longest driver on the PGA Tour. And he didn't have a gigantic turn. It's a good turn, but not enormous. Yeah. But he had this differential. What you don't want to have, Eric, is the hips and the shoulders turning together in tandem. And the way you do that, the only way you can do that is to stand up a little bit and level out your shoulder turn so you can have a level hip turn, which is a death move. It's something that I absolutely don't want to have happen with my students.
And to be honest, as I've been chasing distance with my swing, I developed some of that where I lift my belt buckle on my shoulders. The differential isn't too big sometimes, so it's something I think I can improve upon. And I think the second key thing beyond the idea of like, hey, we're not saying don't turn your hips at all and turn your shoulders a lot, it's the differential. And then in transition, right? Because we did a video this year on X Factor. We talked about this a little bit, and the idea was, hey, whatever differential you have at the top, if we can increase that in the early transition part, you get some of that slingshot, stretch, shorten
exactly
cycle,
right. You
like
get
an
the
explosion.
Slingshot. Absolutely. The biggest differential we saw to start the downswing, the increasing the X, we call it stretching the X, was Angel Cabrera. And he's a Masters champion, a US Open champion, and one of the longest hitters I've seen, and just a phenomenal ball striker. And Angel increased 26 degrees, was the biggest we've ever had. Now some other players don't get that much, but they all start this a little bit before the shoulders. Yeah. Some do it a little bit more, some do it a little less. And I also wanted to mention that about 30% of the PGA Tour players lift their left heel. And I talked about that in the book too. I know you've read it. And you know how the knee moves, how much the knee should move, but I put in there, you know, you're not going to take out Jack Nicklaus and Johnny Miller and some of the guys that lift their left heel right now. It's nothing wrong with that, especially for older players or people that don't have a lot of flexibility in their body, they need to lift this left heel so they can get enough rotation.
So let's flip-flop, Jim, for a
Yeah.
second. I'm going to bunt some out here. Would you prefer, so like, okay, the common person that I would work with or deal with lacks turn typically in both areas.
Right.
I would say. They have very little hip turn, and then consequently they have very little shoulder turn. And I think sometimes in an effort for me to be like, hey, more turn, more turn, more turn, like where do we draw the line between, like let's say I'm a guy who comes up, right? And I'm just gonna make up numbers.
Yeah.
Let's say I have 25 degrees of shoulder turn, and I have
Hip turn.
Hip turn, yeah.
Yeah.
25 here, maybe I have 30 here, and I've got 70 here. So I got a 40 differential. But because I never got this turned, you know, I never got the butt of the club far enough. I maybe didn't get it deep enough. Like I wasn't allowed to swing far enough.
Yeah.
Right? Would you be okay or start that guy or gal by increasing some of the lower first
Yeah, you could do that.
to allow them to increase some of the upper?
Yeah, and then the other thing about turning is the elasticity in your shoulder blades and your upper body. See if they could get this right shoulder to turn up and behind them a little bit more like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's tremendous flexibility that you have. But that's a great teaching thought that I've
Okay.
used forever. And then going back, I've always thought, hey, this knee has a mobility and it can extend. And the only thing that I don't like is for the leg to lock. And I
Fully
asked
lock.
Sam Snead about this, and I've talked to a lot of players because there are some great players like Trevino I talked to that have a very straight leg when they go back.
Yeah.
But if it locks, to me, that's when I draw the line.
Too much.
So I think the governor for people that turn too much is turning the right toe in again and maintaining flex in your right knee.
Yep.
So look at Jack Nicklaus, for example, or Brooks Koepka, or a lot of other guys that really keep a lot of knee flex.
Yep.
They're still able to make a big turn with the hips
Yep.
and a big turn with their shoulders. But if you keep flexing this knee, you just can't. You really can try to turn your hips as much as you want. And the other thing that I want you to talk about along with me is the angle of your hips. And this, you do not turn your hips level. I mentioned it a little bit before, but they go on a tilt. This left hip's going down, the right hip's going up on the backswing because we're tilted forward.
Because we're bent over. So when I go back, there's a little bit of tilting of my hips.
Yeah.
I'm bent over here. Now, let's say I'm the golfer who, I've got too much turn. I can maybe bring that in, keep the knee a little
And then I
flexed.
just say keep a little more flex in your right knee and your backswing. We can take it out like that.
Now, let's say you got the opposite. Maybe someone's too static, right?
Lift the left heel, move the left knee over.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
maybe allow a little more freedom, just a little of the,
Yeah.
a little bit more freedom of the turning piece.
Yeah.
And then the trail leg for those players can straighten some.
Oh,
We're saying
absolutely.
not locked out.
That knee, this leg has movement to it. You certainly, I guess this is what you were referring to early on, that people thought the X factor was no knee action, no
motion.
hip turn, and just turn back like that. Well, I mean, I play golf my whole life. I know I've never said that once in my life,
Right.
but I have seen it written. I've seen people think that the X factor was no lower body rotation, all upper. That's not true.
Yeah.
And I also talked about, which we can keep going on here, about taking the X to impact. And,
Yeah.
those are all part of the X Factor book.
One of the unfortunate things, like I told you in studying some to come here, is I have like 57 topics that I think we could talk about. So let's say with this part, when I go up to the top, let's say I'm going to hit one or two here.
Yeah.
As I go up to the top, and maybe I'll just hit a normal one to start with, but let's say I have sort of good alignments at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, and I'm like, hey, Jim, I'm looking at this and I have like I don't have any increase on the way down.
Right.
And I'd like to have that.
Right.
I'd like to have that whip effect.
Yeah.
Maybe for me, as I'm starting down, am I having some sensations like my belt buckles moving forward and turning, sort of initiating down here, maybe not allowing this to turn right away?
And the real key for this that you need to do for somebody that has that problem is the understanding that as the club's going away, this is starting to happen earlier than they think.
Okay.
You're stacking your right side on the backswing, and then as you start down, you're stacking the left side. But you're definitely not stacking the left side on the backswing. You've got to get loaded up if you're going to hit it far,
Right.
and get some good trajectory on your shots. But in this section of your swing, somewhere right in here, we're starting to go the other way. And that can be a very difficult thing. I'm really careful when I teach that to somebody, because people can really get out of sync
Yeah.
doing it. But that's really what all the top players do in their swings.
And so really for me to get the good differential, it's
gotta go
sequencing.
You got to go earlier.
Yeah, it's an earlier, I think. Got it. Okay, cool. So let me do a little bunt here, Jim. I'm going to go out towards that red flag out there. I'm just going to do a stock one. I'm going to just do my normal one, then maybe we'll talk through a couple different feels as we go here. So here's Eric normal bunt driver. Little hooky, but not bad for me.
No, not bad at all.
I think
I was just watching your swing, but yeah, you hit it pretty solid, maybe a little on the toe.
Best you've ever seen, Jim, or?
One of the best.
Okay,
yeah, one of the best I've ever seen.
Thank you.
It's got tremendous potential.
I might do okay teaching golf one day. Huh? So as I go back, you know, one of the pieces, and I hear what you're saying there in terms of the sequencing.
Right.
When I do better with that, I get better in terms of my X factor and my turns. So when I go back, and this is another video, we were talking about the V gap between the longest and shorter hitters.
Yeah.
But for me, when I go really well is when I'm getting what feels like width earlier, and then I'm starting my downswing as I start down. I have a sensation for the first like 2 inches or so where my lower body wants to go and my upper body just has a slight resist. Like my arms and hands are almost feeling like they're going up and back.
Yeah, they feel a little stretch.
Just a little bit of stretch as I start down. Let's do a little stretch one more. I was a little toe hooky. That was better.
Yeah.
So you guys heard it here first. The best swing Jim McLean has ever seen here at the Biltmore. I think that went over everything pretty good.
Well, we got into it pretty good. Yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about, but I think we talked pretty much in detail on the backswing. Of how we're loading up and how the centers move, and that you're definitely out turning with the upper body.
So if you guys let us know in the comments down below, if you guys want to hear more about X Factor, see some more videos with Jim. We talked about the app earlier that they have coming out. You guys can see a lot more info on this, because we could talk more transition into impact, etc. But that's the X Factor general concept. Thank you guys for watching. Jim, thank you as always. Leave your comments down below with any questions. All right, guys, thanks for watching today's video. If you liked the video, do us a favor, click that like button down below, click subscribe, and leave a comment. What do you think about these videos? Would you like to see more Jim McLean? I know we would. Hopefully you guys would too. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment down below.